Hey, this is Mark Charles, and I would like to give you an update on the work that my wife and I, Rachel, have been doing regarding the creating a common memory and education around the Doctrine of Discovery. But before I get into that, I'd like to just wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We had a great time as a family. The kids were off school, and I had a chance to speak at the Urbana Missions Conference during the week between Christmas and New Year's. And my parents came out and spent about a week and a half with us here in D.C., and it was a great time for our kids to see their grandparents and for my parents to see where we're living and the work that we're involved in and meet some of the people we're getting to know through church and other things here in D.C. So I hope everyone else had a great Christmas and a very good New Year. And I know myself, I'm very excited about some of the things that are going on. One of the biggest things that's happening right now is we are really clarifying the message and really the vision of what we're trying to do regarding the Doctrine of Discovery. Over the past several years, and maybe especially the past 6 or 8 months, I've been talking a lot about the need to create a common memory and have even laid out some of these ideas for a Truth Commission. It's been in about the past month or so that I've really kind of decided or landed on the need in our nation, not just for a Truth Commission, but for a Truth and Conciliation Commission. Now, most nations that have had events like this, such as South Africa and Rwanda and even Canada, had what were called Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. However, as I've been wrestling more with our history as a nation, understanding more of the Doctrine of Discovery, and speaking with even other Native leaders and other people who are passionate about this issue, I've come to realize that the term reconciliation is not accurate for what we're trying to do. Reconciliation implies a pre-existing harmony or unity in a relationship that you're trying to regain or come back to. And if you understand the Doctrine of Discovery, we understand that with both Native Americans and African Americans, there never was a good relationship with Europeans when they came here, because they came armed with this Doctrine of Discovery. They went to Africa armed with the Doctrine of Discovery that assumed we weren't human. And so we're not trying to reconcile a relationship. Instead, we're trying to bring conciliation into a relationship that's very broken. Conciliation is defined as to mediate a dispute. And that is what we're trying to do. And I believe for our relationships to become healthier and for there to be a good way forward, what we need to do is we need a conciliation of some of the hurt and the injustice that's happened in the past so that we can find a way to move forward. So I have laid out a vision, and I did this for the first time at Urbana. I laid out a vision for what I'm calling TCC 2021, which is a Truth and Conciliation Commission in the year 2021. I pushed it out about 5 years because I believe there's a lot of groundwork we need to lay first within several communities within the nation. The first community I really want to invest a lot of time in over the next 3 years specifically is the church. As you know, the Doctrine of Discovery came from the church. It came from the Catholic Church. It was accepted by Christians, and it created this worldview within our nation that not only are people of color less than human, but it also created this belief in a manifest destiny and American exceptionalism. And so the church has a lot of ownership in the historic injustices of our nation. But I'm deeply convinced that God also wants to use the church, not only to heal the church, his bride himself, but also to use the church to bring healing for the rest of our citizens and the people here on Turtle Island. And so my first goal is to work within the church over the next 3 years and to really bring the church into a season of lament. Not an event of lament, not a period of lament, but a season of lament. I don't know how long that season will last. It may be 6 months, it may be 6 years. But I want to help bring the church through an education of the Doctrine of Discovery, what it is and how we've been complicit in it, to bring the church into a season where we just lament our sin before God and confess our brokenness and ask God to lead the way as we try to move forward in this. I'm hoping to build some partnerships, both with some pre-existing partners as well as with new partners around the country. So next week I'll be meeting with the Worship Institute and John Whitley and a few other people there regarding the work that they're doing within worship in the local church and the partnership I've had with them for 5 or 6 years, and I really want to engage a dialogue with them about how can our partnership be used and be kind of clarified to help bring in this season of lament for the church here in the United States. There's a few other opportunities I have coming up. Tonight, actually, my family and I are traveling to Virginia Beach, where I am meeting with an organization that's planning a conference called United Cry this coming April. And what their vision is to bring 30,000 Christians and pastors to D.C. to confess and to ask for forgiveness for the sins of our nation. And this group is already dealing with the sin of slavery. And they have asked me to come in and speak with them tomorrow regarding the Doctrine of Discovery. And I'm very excited about this opportunity. I'm very excited to see what's going to come of this conversation. And if I think this can be a very good moment for our church, the church as a whole, not just to come in and confess sin and wash feet and go home, but to come in and really be confronted with the sin of our nation, the Doctrine of Discovery, and then to be invited into a season of lament. So that's one of my first visions with this TCC 2021. Another piece of it is I really want to speak with Native communities, and I want to begin to change our paradigm and an understanding that we are not the helpless victims of an oppressive colonial government, but we are the host people of the land. We are the original inhabitants of this land, and we need to act into our role of host. And there's an article I wrote on my blog regarding the renaming of Denali. And that article gives out a good picture of what I think it looks like for the Native community to be the host of this land. You're welcome to go to my blog at wirelesshogan.com and look at that article regarding Denali. It was also published on Sojourners and a few other places. The third community I really want to engage with is our communities of color and other people in this nation. And what I want to engage that audience with is an understanding that white America is also a traumatized people group. And let me explain that in a minute. So oftentimes when we look at the historical injustices and oppression from the Doctrine of Discovery, we very clearly see the historical trauma that has been brought upon Native communities and African American communities. But what I try to point out every time I speak is that you cannot create a nation based on 500 years of dehumanizing injustice without traumatizing yourself. And so white America is also deeply traumatized by this history, and in many ways is shocked and cannot believe what was done on its behalf or what it actually did to become who it is today. That's why we see such sharp reactions to this history becoming exposed and coming to the forefront, because it's something our nation has been in denial of for the past 400 or 500 years. It doesn't know what to do with this history. And that reaction, that sometimes that knee-jerk, that loud, that even at times violent reaction that we see when confronted with this history, that I'm arguing is coming out of a place of trauma. And so I want our nation to understand that white America is also a traumatized people group. It has not come out of this history unscathed. And we need to understand that and work with that as we move this conversation forward. The final thing that I'm doing, and the reason I laid out this conversation in a TCC 2021, is because I really think it's going to take about 5 years for us to both prep different communities within the nation to have this conversation, and then it will take about 2 years to really bring this into a national conversation, a national dialogue. And so there are many ways that nations in the past have dealt with their historic injustices. South Africa, after the falling of apartheid, had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Rwanda, after a very bloody civil war, also had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Canada, in response to a very costly lawsuit, settled and ended up having a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. All of those things came out of a period of crisis. And I am not hoping for, I do not want to see more crisis befall the United States of America. And so I'm not trying to plan for or respond to any sort of crisis, or new crisis being interjected into our nation. The other way that these dialogues have come about is through a model of disruption. which is through protests and through other means of kind of either co-opting the stage or securing a stage so that these things can be brought to the attention of the public. But I'm afraid that if I use a method of disruption, that it's not going to bring about the depth of dialogue that we really need to have as a nation. And so what I'm hoping to do is I realize that every 4 years, our country has a national dialogue about who we are and where we're going. And that's in our presidential elections. We're having that dialogue right now as our presidential campaign, our presidential candidates are traveling the nation, talking about their vision for this nation and what they want to do to get us to that vision. And so I chose 2021 because I would like us to wrap this conversation into the next election cycle. And I would like the next election cycle to include a dialogue about our history and what we've done as a nation and what we need to do to address that so that we can move forward. And so I've chosen 2021 because they'll be right after the next election, and I think it will be a prime time if we can use the election cycle to engage this dialogue for our nation to come together and have a Truth and Conciliation Commission. In the next few weeks, I have some very exciting events coming up. As I said earlier, I'm traveling down with my family to Virginia Beach this afternoon so that we can meet with this group there for the UnitedCry.com. I encourage you to go to their website and look at what they're hoping to do, and I'll definitely keep you updated as I continue in dialogue with this group and try to lay out some of the vision that I think we need to do as a nation. Next week, I'll be traveling down to Jackson, Mississippi, and I'll be meeting with the CCDA board. I serve on this board, and as many of you may know, I had a chance, along with my good friend Soong-Chan Rah, to speak to the CCDA National Conference and lay out both the Doctrine of Discovery and a vision for lament and a vision for a national dialogue on this history. And Soong-Chan Rah, who just finished publishing his latest book on lament, talked about the need for lament and some of the historical injustices within our nation, and it really generated some deep and good discussion within the CCDA. And so I'm looking forward to being at this board meeting as we debrief the conference and what is some of the feedback and what are some of the things that we need to do as an organization to continue to move that conversation forward. Next week, and I'm also traveling to Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I'm going to be at the Church of the Servant in Grand Rapids on the 23rd and 24th of this month. I'll be leading a blanket exercise with some other partners and inviting the Christian community, the Christian Reformed Church within the Grand Rapids area to come and learn about the history of the Doctrine of Discovery. I'll also be giving a presentation on the Doctrine of Discovery and engaging several dialogues there. And then on Sunday, I'll be preaching at the church and talking about some of the biblical dynamics between power and authority. I'm really looking forward to those 2 days and the conversations that will happen there. And then the very next week, Wednesday of that week, I'll be going back to Grand Rapids again, and I'll be taking part in the Worship Symposium, which is with an organization that I partner deeply with, which is the Calvin Institute of Christian Worship. And I'll be involved in a panel discussion on the cancer of racism and other forms of cancer, both health-wise and the cancer of racism and others here in our nation. And I'm excited to be on that panel, as well as to engage in a seminar and lead a discussion on contextualizing worship and what does it look like for natives to be native and come to Christ and follow Christ. So these are just a few of the events on the calendar for the next few weeks. One of the reasons that we're doing crowdfunding is because my wife and I recognize we cannot do this alone. This type of work needs a lot of prayer. There's a lot of resources that are needed, even just moving to D.C., where the cost of living is much higher than it was on the Navajo Reservation. And so we need partners, and we want to invite people to walk with us as we go through this journey. Most of my income in the past has come from my speaking engagements. However, because months like December and early January are generally pretty light on public speaking engagements, and I don't get a lot of income during those months, it's those months that we hope and we look to people through our crowdfunding efforts to help balance out our budget and help us be able to pay our bills and get our rent paid on time and buy the groceries we need and the things that we just need to do as a family in order to live here. And as well as the travel expenses and the tickets we buy and the places I need to go to engage these conversations. So I'm glad that you're here with us. I'm glad you've watched this video. I welcome you, if you like the vision of what we're working on, to contact me, to email me, to Facebook me, and let me know what you're thinking. And we also invite you, if you are interested, to support us through our crowdfunding efforts. Thank you so much for listening to this message. Thank you for your prayers, and I look forward to being in contact again soon. Akiahat and Hakonet.